Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Madeline Hannah Swan had no idea why she was reborn as Bella's older twin sister. She had never particularly wished to be a part of this book, whether to replace Bella or add herself in it. She never really had a crush on Edward or fangirled over Jacob. Sure, she was a fan of the books back in middle school, but her love and enthusiasm quickly withered when the movies came out and its popularity went way out of proportion. She thought it was ridiculous. Team Edward and Team Jacob, screw that. She'd rather claim complete dislike of the entire franchise rather than be lumped in with those psychotic people that called themselves Twilight fans. At first, it was pretty cool being smarter than everyone else, even if at the time she didn't know why. Of course, she wasn't born with the knowledge of a 17-year-old right off the bat. The knowledge integrated itself gradually, or all of a sudden, sometimes. As a kid, she knew she was different from others, her age group, and she struggled to act like they would, but she still came off as smarter and more mature. Hey, sometimes acting like a kid pissed her off, and some of her mature teenage sarcasm would slip. It got easier the older she got and the more she remembered, but it was still hard, especially when she found she had the same powers as Alice. Hell, she never asked to be able to see the future. Sure, she thought it was cool, and she, like she assumed most people did, wondered what it'd be like to have the power. But she never openly wished for it. Maddie knew it'd be more of a pain than anything. Granted, she considered most things a pain or a hassle in her past life. Maddie was glad that she grew out of her similar appearance to Bella, not wanting to look like her. It's not like Bella was hideous. In fact, she was rather pretty. Not that Bella thought so, but Maddie wanted to have some individualism, to not be seen as Bella's twin, and instead just her sister. A sister could be seen as herself, but a twin was always seen as an add-on, something that came with the package, and while being a twin sometimes had its advantages overall, Maddie preferred being seen as an individual, something she had no trouble with when they got older, when they became the age that Maddie had died at in her old life, 17. While Bella was of average height and weight, Maddie found herself being similar in stature to how Alice was explained. Petite, thin, short, but still held the delicate curves that identified her as a female. Overall, she was pixie-like. Now, Maddie hadn't wanted to look like Alice really. Though she admitted she was cute, she was relieved when her honey brown hair, not quite brunette but not quite blonde, lightly tanned skin, and forest green eyes were different from both Bella and what she knew Alice looked like. She did, however, also have a short haircut. Not because she wanted to be like Alice, but because she had always preferred her hair like that. It was just coincidence. Maddie was pretty happy when she found out she had ramrod straight hair, unlike her frizzy hair of her past life, because now she could get her hair cut shorter than before, without having to worry about getting an afro. So she did. Get her hair cut short, of course. Her straight honey brown hair came across with strong feminine lines that were clipped and structured into a substantial top that blanketed over her left eye and connected with the influence on the side. The other side was styled behind the ear, while extending gravity to the hair above. Maddie was extremely happy with her haircut and kept it that way, never letting it grow out anymore. It was so easy to style in the morning, and washing it was ridiculously quick and easy as well. Fabulous and easy to manage, just the way she liked it. She had also kept many aspects of her past life with her into this one, further separating her from Bella. While Bella was school smart and logical but unimaginative and uncoordinated, Maddie was more physically fit and creative, but was weak in things like science and math. While Maddie wasn't as obsessed with fashion and makeup as Alice or Rosie, she did have a great fashion sense and liked to wear fantastic clothes, making her seem like a fashionista in comparison to her sister Bella. The only similarities they seemed to share was their dislike of attention and their apathetic attitude towards makeup. Bella wore no makeup at all, and Maddie only occasionally wore mascara, eyeliner, and chapstick that doubled as lip gloss, bothering with no more than that since it was a pain to take off. Maddie, despite her small dislike of Bella in her previous life, grew attached to her new sister. Obviously, it was rather difficult to hold any negative feelings towards your younger twin sister, but that didn't mean she spent every waking moment with Bella. It would be obvious that Maddie was independent starting at a young age. She had quickly started to save up money, doing chores and odd jobs like pet sitting and helping clean for her neighbors, young and elderly, and also earned money recycling. Renee just thought it was cute and let her do it, and since Maddie was the one collecting the money, Renee was never surprised with just how much her little girl was making, since Maddie usually just replied with a lot rather than telling her the exact amount of money she earned. After all, pet-sitting jobs paid well even if it's just a few hours, the minimum she'd earned on them being $10 for an hour, though she got more when she helped elderly neighbors with her chores, since they thought she was cute and doted on her. In the end, it helped transition her into a part-time job at a pet store and steadily earning enough money to buy her own wardrobe and fill her bookcase until it seemed ready to burst at the seams, which Maddie was happy about since her fashion sense would have broken Renee's wallet, especially when she bought goth outfits. Those things were expensive. It also helped her pay for her car, a black Volkswagen Bug, her baby, though it stayed in Forks with Charlie. Another difference from Bella. While Bella hated Forks and awkward summers with Charlie, Maddie loved them, preferring the clouds and rain and greenery to the dry heat, the sun, and desert of Phoenix. She had continued spending the summer there, even after Bella had put her foot down at 14 and decided to stop going entirely. A small change to the book when a compromise was made, and Charlie and Bella went to Southern California for 2 weeks. Not that Maddie cared. It didn't seem to hurt anything. Renee still met Phil, and Bella still planned to go to Forks with her twin in exile to give the couple space. Maddie had thought her similarities in abilities and appearance to Alice made her presence there unnecessary. It was a message saying that the plot, the storyline, would happen with or without her presence there, and Maddie was fine with that. She didn't feel excluded because she didn't believe herself a part of it to begin with. Immortality as a vampire, while alluring, was easily deterred in her mind when she thought of the Volturi, and how they'd love to make a puppet out of her, so she contented herself with living a more or less human life, one that she'd be much more comfortable in, economic-wise, than in her past. One and that alone was something she was pretty happy about. That's right, she was okay with being an extra that went on to live her own life. Not that she didn't like excitement and danger, but smooth sailing was just comfortable, at least that's what she thought she'd be doing, until she got some very interesting visions the moment Bella decided to move to Forks. First sight. Renee was driving Bella and I to the airport with the windows rolled down. My clothes were amazingly casual compared to the goth outfits I tended to wear. I wore a red and black striped printed envelope necktop, 1969 curvy skinny indigo rinsed jeans, and black ash boogie sneaker wedges. My navy wool moto jacket was sitting in the seat next to me, neatly folded and waiting for me to put it on. Bella was wearing exactly what the book said she would wear today, and exactly what I had seen in a passing vision, a sleeveless, white eyelet lace shirt, her carry-on item being a parka. I realized that this meant that Bella was no doubt thinking about her self-imposed exile to Forks, but couldn't bring myself to care. I was ecstatic to be moving to Forks with any sense of permanence, not just because I loved it there and held a distaste for Phoenix, but because I couldn't help but look forward to experiencing what I'd seen in my visions the minute that Bella resolutely decided to move. I had thought I wasn't necessary, that I wasn't needed for the story to go like before, but I was wrong. The visions proved that there was no Alice. The fact shocked me when I realized it. At first I didn't realize, since the clearest vision I had was Bella and Edward together, and me and Jasper together, both human with vampire. It shocked the heck out of me at first, and I tried concentrating on the Cullens to see if I could find Alice. But no cigar, Alice just wasn't there. She didn't exist. It hit me hard when I realized that I was the Alice of this whacked-up alternate Twilight universe. Later it confused me as to why I could even see the Cullens at all, since I blatantly remembered that Alice wasn't supposed to be able to see visions of things she'd never been before, like half-vampires and shapeshifters, but I was able to see the Cullens just fine despite my obvious non-vampirism. Sure, their images were kind of blurry, like looking through a screen, but I could still see them, unlike the blanks in my vision I assumed was time spent at the reservation with Jacob or other werewolves. Later I had a vision of Bella and I as vampires together with Edward and Jasper, and I figured that I could kind of see them, since I was going to be one, and left it at that, since thinking too hard on it gave me a headache. At first I had kind of flipped about being some kind of replacement for Alice in this world, and I confused and frustrated myself with questions of why Jasper was a Cullen, when Alice was the one who brought him to them in the books. But after a short-lived identity crisis and some silent panicking, I decided it would do no good, freaking out about it. Being Alice's replacement wouldn't change, and it didn't change who I was in the least. I also chose not to feel any sense of responsibility over it, knowing it would only make me feel pressured. I just decided to do what I do best, go with the flow, and figure things out as they come. So yeah, I was pretty excited about moving to Forks. I mean, who wouldn't look forward to finding out if Jasper was your soulmate? I'd always preferred Jasper anyways. I'd never had a crush on Edward or Jacob or even Carlisle. Edward was too mopey for me and Jacob too immature. Carlisle was too fatherly, and let's not even mention Emmett. I liked Jasper because unlike the rest of the Cullens, he wasn't innocent. He had feasted on human blood, countless times, and had torn apart vampires with savage skill and precision. Yet he consciously made the choice to turn over a new leaf and live a vegetarian lifestyle. That, more than anything, spoke to me of how amazing a person he was, despite his probably not thinking so, something I was planning on changing if Jasper and I really were compatible. Bella, Maddie, Renee shook me from my musings. You don't have to do this. What was this? The 20th time she'd asked that. I wondered. Bella was probably having that internal panic attack about leaving their airheaded mother alone. Temporarily forgetting all about Phil. Nice guy, but kind of boring. He'd never make it past the minor leagues. I want to go, Bella lied. The book really wasn't exaggerating when it said Bella was a horrible liar. I'd learned that early on. At least she sounded a little convincing this time. Though that probably had to do with the fact that she'd been saying it so often recently. Yeah, who wants to hear you and Phil get busy at night, while Bella and I pretend we're deaf? I joked, trying to lighten the mood, and succeeding. Renee laughed a little while. Bella just sent me a scolding look. Yeah, I was the older by 10 minutes, but Bella was the supposedly more mature one. I just shrugged off the look. It's never worked before. Tell Charlie I said hi. We will, we said in unison, making me grin and making Bella's eyes twinkle in amusement. I remember how I insisted on practicing trying to speak at the same time when we were younger, when we looked more alike. I wanted to do it to freak people out or make them all at us. I don't know how I convinced her, but I did, and I was able to get what I wanted that much more, and now it's second nature to us. Heck yeah, cool twins. I'll see you two soon, she insisted. You two can come home whenever you want. I'll come right back as soon as you guys need me. It was obvious that it would be a hard promise to keep, one that involved sacrifice on her part. Don't worry about us, Bella urged, and I was quick to back her up and reassure them both. Yeah, we're going to be really happy there, both of us, I said in an almost hard tone, completely self-assured. And they both looked at me a little surprised before realization, understanding, and finally relief passed through their expressive eyes. They may not know that I can see the future, but I led them to believe I had some kind of super sixth sense, one that gave me feelings that involved avoiding danger, getting lucky, and other things as mundane as the weather. They learned early on that I was freakishly accurate and accepted some things I said as fact. Especially when I used a certain tone of voice to say them, one that spoke of total confidence and seriousness like just now. It was pretty useful. We love you, Mom, Bella said, as they hugged before they let go, and it was my turn. Then we got on the plane, and she was gone. The 4-hour flight from Phoenix and Seattle, and the hour flight in a small plane to Port Angeles, was more tedious than I'd expected. I was so geared up for just seeing the Cullens for the first time that the time from now to then seemed agonizingly slow. Even Bella seemed annoyed at my more pronounced twitching and fidgeting. I hoped that the hour ride with Charlie and Bella would sufficiently distract me until we got home and I could distract and exhaust myself with unpacking and settling and dinner. I was currently thinking on what outfit I was going to wear for the first day when we arrived at Port Angeles. It was raining, of course, just like the book said, and just like the vision I had. It was pretty weird and trippy to see a future I already knew about, but I figured that it was going to continue being like that until the end of Breaking Dawn when I finally wouldn't know what the hell was going on, except for whatever my vision showed me, so I decided to just get used to it. Charlie was obviously waiting with the cruiser, and I was seriously hoping our luggage would fit and that I'd still have enough room to sit in the back. Unlike Bella, I thought it was pretty cool that Charlie was the chief of police. It was a great way to get would-be suitors to back off. My dad as a police chief is a very effective way to get guys to leave you alone. Of course, actually riding in one was a bummer since it slowed down traffic a lot. Charlie gave Bella an awkward one-armed hug after I kept Bella from stumbling as soon as she got off the plane. I swear half of my visions since I was born have been of Bella getting into some kind of accident, and I'd been able to stop half of that half. Considering the other half, I wasn't in the vicinity to stop her from somehow getting herself hurt. "It's good to see you, Bells," he said as he automatically caught and steadied her when she stumbled again. "You haven't changed much." He turned to me and his smile turned less awkward and more familiar. "It's good to see you too, Maddie." We hugged too, but it was much less awkward, which was a given as Charlie had more practice being a dad with me. He really liked that I used him to keep away the boys and that I was able to make things comfortable without having to talk. Bella couldn't do that because she was too much like Charlie. "How's Renee?" "Mom's fine. It's good to see you too, Dad." Bella answered. "Ditto," I said with a grin. Bella only had a few bags. Most of her clothes weren't Forks wearable, and her and Renee had pooled their resources to get her a scanty winter wardrobe. I insisted on helping with my own money, but both had refused, especially Bella, both knowing I'd buy only expensive clothes for her, and Renee didn't want me to waste money, while Bella didn't want me to waste money buying her fancy clothes. I did anyway, just not a lot. Just a few sweaters and warm shirts, and they were less expensive and showy than the clothes I usually bought, which Bella appreciated but still scolded me for wasting money on her. I rolled my eyes at her. Of course. On the other hand, had more than a few bags that would not easily all fit in the trunk. I was only grateful that half my clothes were already waiting in my room in Forks since the other half had trouble fitting without taking up my seat. And this is after I went through my clothes and donated all the stuff that I didn't want or didn't fit me anymore. "I found a good car for you, Bella. Really cheap," he announced when we were strapped in. "What kind of car?" Bella said suspiciously. She had every reason to be, I thought, as I remembered just the kind of monstrosity waiting in the driveway of our house. "Well, it's a truck, actually. A Chevy." "Oh, here we go." "Where did you find it?" Bella questioned. "Do you remember Billy Black down at La Push?" "Ah, Billy. We got into the habit of flirting with each other as a joke when I hit puberty. We both found it funny how flustered Charlie got sometimes and how embarrassed Jacob became. No. Yes, I said at the same time she spoke. Charlie sent me an amused glance through the mirror, while Bella just sent me a look that said, "Not helping." I just smiled at her. "He used to go fishing with us during the summer," Charlie prompted. Correction, he still does. "Bella just doesn't go anymore, and neither do I actually. I spent time with Jacob and the Clearwater siblings instead." "He's in a wheelchair now," Charlie continued when Bella didn't respond. "So he can't drive anymore, and he offered to sell me his truck cheap." "What year is it?" I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing at Charlie's expression. He should have expected that question. "Well, Billy's done a lot of work on the engine. Actually, I was pretty sure it was mostly Jacob. Talented little punk. It's only a few years old, really." Of course, Bella wasn't about to give up. Stubborn. "When did he buy it?" "He bought it in 1984, I think." "Did he buy it new?" "Well, no. I think it was new in the early 60s, or late 50s at earliest," he admitted sheepishly, making me snicker under my breath, and this time it was his turn to give me a look. One that I ignored, looking innocently out the window as if I hadn't made a sound. "Dad, I don't really know anything about cars. I wouldn't be able to fix it if anything went wrong, and I couldn't afford a mechanic." "Really, Bella, the thing runs great. They don't build them like that anymore." I resisted the urge to scoff. If by run great he means roars like the coming of Armageddon, then yeah, it runs perfectly. "How cheap is cheap?" I sighed. Bella could never just leave things be. She couldn't just say thanks and move on. No, she couldn't. "Well, honey, I kind of already bought it for you, as a homecoming gift." Charlie peeked sideways at her with a hopeful expression, and before she could say what I knew she was about to say, I reached around the seat and pinched her side. I was sitting behind her, used to me doing so randomly, rather than jump and say, "Ouch." She just turned to me with a light glare, which I sent back, warningly, telling her to think twice about what she was going to say. I understood her wish to feel independent and unreliant on Charlie. I really did. But there was that, and there was just being plain ungrateful. It was one of the reasons I started to dislike Bella in the book. She didn't know where to draw that line. "That's really nice, Dad. Thanks. I really appreciate it." She turned to me with a "you happy now" expression, one that I nodded at in satisfaction. It wasn't great, but it was better than her telling Charlie he didn't need to do it and hurt his feelings. "Well, now, you're welcome," he mumbled, embarrassed by her thanks, which made me smile. They exchanged a few more comments about the weather, something I contributed to a little before we descended into a comfortable silence, one that would have felt awkward if it was only Bella and Charlie around, but me being there eased the tension, not just because I was a third person, but because both of them were comfortable and familiar with me. Eventually we made it to Charlie's. A difference from the book and here was that the house Charlie had moved into with Renee was bigger. Rather than a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. I assumed it was to accommodate my coming even before Bella and I were born, so I didn't overly mind the discrepancy, and I doubted it'd have any major effect on the basic plot. I took the opportunity that Bella's sincere enthusiasm over her new-to-her car presented to unpack my luggage in solitude. I knew it would only take Bella one trip to get her luggage upstairs, and I wanted to give her and Charlie more time together, as I wanted them to get used to each other fast, so the awkwardness around the two would go away more quickly. Charlie already knew my habits, so he wasn't really bummed or insulted when I ghosted away from them and holed myself up in my room to unpack without a word. The walls of my room were a navy blue with white trimming. White lace curtains hung at the window, and the desk Charlie had moved in a few years back. Along with Bella's was where my playpen had been, and the crib I had been replaced with a twin bed that changed to a full-sized bed when I had decided to keep coming. When Bella had stopped, it was a birthday gift from Renee and Charlie when I had tactfully complained about almost rolling out of my bed early enough for them to arrange buying it for me. A canopy was added the next summer as a kind of father-daughter project. It really didn't take that much effort. Charlie had gotten some thick, clean, sturdy rope and hung it on the ceiling above the bed, while I got some black, transparent, silky fabric and sewed it a bit. Soon enough, Charlie hung it up and I had a pretty canopy to match my relatively new bed. Charlie and I had offered to buy her a bigger bed and to make her a canopy during one of our summers together, if she wanted, but she had refused, saying that it would be pointless since she hardly went anymore, and even if she did, she'd always been a minimalist, so she was content with what she had. I shrugged at my thoughts, examining my large closet. Charlie had sold my old one when he saw it wouldn't be enough to house all my clothes, and we collaborated to buy me a bigger one, along with a big bookshelf. Since Charlie knew better than Renee my love of books, while my bookshelf in Phoenix would overflow with my books, this one would be able to comfortably hold them all. The rocking chair that matched Bella's was resting on the wall next to the bookshelf, and I avidly remembered summer days I spent reading on it. I turned to my desk to see the rather new model computer and printer on my desk, another collaboration between Charlie and I. I refused to put up with a slow computer and even less a slow internet connection. So Charlie and I agreed to get a phone, TV, and internet package that I would pay during the summer and he would pay when I wasn't there. We decided to switch off every month now that I lived here. In the long run, though, it saved Charlie money and made him happy since the TV got a lot more sports channels now and his phone bills were cheaper. I'm sure Charlie was glad they had 2 bathrooms since it meant he didn't have to share with 2 teenage girls. I was pretty happy about it, too, even if it meant continuing to share a bathroom with Bella. I preferred not to make Charlie too uncomfortable. Bella was probably even more happy about the separate bathrooms than I was, considering how much she was dreading this entire event. She was also probably enjoying the fact that Charlie doesn't hover like Renee did. He left us alone to do our own thing and trusted us not to do anything stupid. I was debating whether or not to comfort Bella tonight, since I knew she would cry herself into a fitful sleep. But a vision decided for me. She would put on the happy facade even with me if I were to try and make her feel better, since she knew I was looking forward to living here. I rolled my eyes at that as I started unpacking. I swear she's such a silent martyr, I muttered to myself as I got to work. It didn't take me long, as I was used to packing and unpacking quickly, and soon enough, I had my clothes for my first day laid out on the rocking chair and my basket of bathroom necessities waiting for my morning shower. I made sure that my clothes wouldn't wrinkle during the night, looking them over once more before I went down to make dinner, knowing Bella would appreciate it. Hung across the chair's back was a black cotton shirt with long flowing sleeves with wide ends, fake leather applications, laced string detail, a swallowtail back, and drawstrings in the back for a fitted waist. It was called Severance. Resting on the seat of the chair was a skirt, the top part made from black crushed velvet and transitioning into multiple layers of voile and satin, with a short front, long back, with the seams detailed with lace ruffles and satin ribbons. This was called Clairvoyant. At the feet of the chair were black suede, Steve Madden baffle high-shaft wedge boots, and folded neatly across her Severance shirt was a cotton and polyester jacket with muff pockets, solid metal buttons, rivet and D-ring details, and a removable hood. This was called Shattered. All in all, the perfect outfit to make a memorable first impression. Sure, most of the older residents in Forks knew about me through Charlie, but the younger generations had no idea. They just thought I was a new student and one of a pair of twins. Well, this would certainly make them look at me differently. They wouldn't see a new student or a twin when they saw me. They'd be too busy gawking at my super awesome goth outfit. It was one of the reasons that I wore these outfits. Not that anyone ever knew the reason I did most things, but I liked it that way. I went to bed, assured of the eventful day I would have tomorrow. The rain and wind last night was like a lullaby to me, and ensured that I got a great night's sleep. I felt pity for Bella since it was those same things that caused her to sleep fitfully, but I was too excited to dwell on it. Eager as I was for the day's events to play out and well-rested as I woke up earlier than I had intended and was more energetic than a person should be in the morning. Bella always hated that. She said she was never awake enough to be able to handle me when she was still half asleep. I shrugged and got ready for school, putting on my clothes quickly and carefully after I made my bed. I brushed away any stray lint and wrinkles, fixing the bows and ribbons that were on it before looking out the window. Thick fog was all I could see, and I took a deep breath, happy I could do so, without feeling like I was suffocating because of the dry heat like in Phoenix. Here the air was sharp and cool, and actually held moisture. I much preferred that to the heat and desert, as it felt much more invigorating, and I thought the weather here was much more beautiful. A lot of it was picture-worthy sometimes, when you saw certain areas that looked positively mystical or supernatural because of rain or fog or ice or snow. It was one of the reasons I started to carry a professional digital camera around with me whenever I was in Forks. I doubted I'd need it at high school, but brought it anyways, just in case. Breakfast was a quiet affair, but that was because I was eating alone. I did say I'd gotten up early. I had just finished putting my bowl and spoon in the sink when Charlie came in. Not at all surprised at how early I was up, and not giving a second glance at what I was wearing. He was too used to both. After he asked me if I was driving Bella to school, seeing my jacket on and keys in hand, and after I informed him that Bella would prefer to go to school alone in her new truck, I saw it in a vision. He wished me good luck at school. I thanked him and went on my way, passing by the framed school pictures of Bella and I in the hall. I knew Bella thought it was embarrassing, but I thought it was cute, since it made Charlie have the image of a proud dad. I didn't much care about being super early to school, wanting to get there before the Cullens since I wanted to have free rein on my thoughts before I was forced to play dumb in my own mind. I knew that Edward could only read my surface thoughts, and not innermost thoughts, unless I specifically brought those to the front, so I would take advantage of that. I thought out my battle plan as I drove to the school. At first, I wasn't sure if I should reveal to them that I could see visions, as I thought it would overwhelm Edward to find a girl that he can't read the mind of. A girl who could see visions of the future. Then later find out that the former is his lacua cantante, or something like that. But in the end, I decided to reveal it, since it would be more beneficial in the long run for them to start taking my visions as truth, and use them to their advantage when Edward got back from Alaska. The school wasn't hard to find, and I'd passed it before in previous summer trips to Forks. I parked in front of the front office, not caring that it was off limits. I would go to the student parking lot after I got my schedule. It was brightly lit and warmer than I expected inside. I walked up to the desk and saw a red head only familiar to me from the book, and a passing vision. Mrs. Cope was her name, if I remembered correctly. She looked up when I approached and had a reaction I was very familiar with. She stiffened and looked like a startled animal when she took in my apparel. "Say, can I help you?" She looked a little miffed that she stuttered and struggled to regain composure. "I'm Madeline Swan," I informed her politely, and saw the awareness and recognition, along with relief, light her eyes. Yeah, Charlie had definitely spread the word that I was normal despite my choice in apparel. "Of course," she said. She dug through the dangerously tall pile of paper on her desk until she found what she was looking for. "I have your schedule right here and a map of the school." She lay out several sheets on the counter to show me. "I also have your twin sisters here. The school thought you'd be more comfortable together, so you have the same schedules." Of course we did. Our old school thought much the same, so we were both advancing the same educationally. Obviously, it helped them be able to do the same here. I answered her unasked question. "My little sister isn't with me. She's a little overwhelmed with the move and the new school and wanted to get through this on her own." "You wouldn't mind terribly explaining this twice, would you?" I asked politely, laying on the innocence and purity. I'd had a lot of practice, and while I couldn't dazzle like vampires could, my cute looks and innocent act did help endear people to me, and it seemed to work on Mrs. Cope as well. She was immediately smitten with me, her cheeks flushing the slightest bit as she gave me a warm and reassuring smile. Oh, of course I wouldn't mind, sweetheart, she said warmly, obviously trying to reassure me. She kindly went through my classes for me, highlighting the best route to each on the map, and gave me a slip to have each teacher sign, which I was to bring back at the end of the day. She sent me an endeared smile and, like Charlie, wished me good luck on my first day. I gave her a cute smile and thanked her before leaving. I went back to my car and moved to the forming line of traffic. Not terrible as it was, only a few cars. It was still pretty early after all. I heard Bella's roaring motor in the distance and heard it cut off, so I assumed she just got to the main office. I didn't know whether they were here yet, so I started to be careful with my thoughts, just in case. I kept myself busy with memorizing the map as soon as I parked my baby before I put it in my brown, genuine soft leather Jack the Ripper Afterbrain bag. I liked it because it had Jack the Ripper's signature etched on it and was printed with anatomical details and handwriting. I took a deep breath and smiled at the prospect of what was waiting as I stepped out of my baby. I put on my hood so the drizzle wouldn't muss up my hair, but held my head up proudly, not intimidated by the few students that were making their way to the school. My smile widened when I saw their priceless gaping expressions in reaction to my clothing from the corner of my eyes. Exactly what I wanted. Once I got to the cafeteria, I went to Building 3, not caring that I was ridiculously early for class. The teacher would probably like that. The classroom was small, but I preferred it to the overcrowded rooms of our old school. I saw the hangers for the coats, but decided against it since my jacket was 81 euros. In other words, it cost $11.12 plus tax, and there was no way I was letting it hang there with the rest of the raincoats. So I just took it off and folded it over my arm, planning to let it rest in my lap during class. I took a slip to the balding man I identified as Mr. Mason from books and visions and was pleasantly surprised when he didn't even react to my clothes. He only stared after he saw my name and sent me to an empty desk in the back. Granted, most of the seats were still empty. I was happy since he was one of the teachers that didn't insist on those silly self-introductions. I ignored the students that were gawking at me and looked through the reading list the teacher gave me. Bronte, Shakespeare, Chaucer, Faulkner. It seemed our Phoenix High School was more ahead, seeing as Bella and I had already read all this. I smiled since I remembered that I brought my folder of old essays, knowing that Bella did not. I didn't really consider it cheating or plagiarism, considering they were my essays, and I thought of it more as recycling. I looked up and smiled encouragingly when Bella walked in, looking visibly uncomfortable. She sent me an unconvincing smile and quickly made her way to my side. "Hey," she said weakly. "Long morning?" I asked softly, talking quietly, knowing that those vultures we called peers were straining to hear us. "Yeah, but I'm fine," she said almost automatically. "If you say so," I said, entirely unconvinced. The letter looked through her reading list in silence. Class was boring and uneventful, despite it being my second favorite subject, and I was startled when the bell rang, signifying the end of it. I was actually sketching in a sketchpad the whole period and lost track of time. I sighed when the nerd identified as Eric used the opportunity to approach us. "You're Isabella? And Madeline Swan, aren't you?" I didn't bother to stop myself when I rolled my eyes. "Bella," she corrected. I would have too if I didn't like people I wasn't close to calling me in such a familiar way. "Where are your next classes?" he asked. I answered for Bella, having already memorized our schedule. "Government with Jefferson in Building 6, I recited easily, making both of them look at me. I just shrugged. "I'm heading toward Building 4. I could show you the way." I bit back a snicker. "I'm Eric," he added. Bella smiled tentatively as I pulled on my jacket. "Thanks," she said. "I appreciate the offer, but I already memorized the map. Feel free to escort Bella there, though. I'm sure she'd appreciate the company," I said with a polite smile, making Bella give me a discreet glare, but it only made my smile widen. "See you soon, Bella," I called back as I made my escape. I hummed a cheery tune and mentally pat myself on the back for escaping Eric's clutches and abandoning Bella to him. So far, my day was going very well. The rest of the morning passed the same. Mr. Varner, our trigonometry teacher, Curse Math, was the only one who made us introduce ourselves to the class. I introduced myself apathetically, not wanting them to think I was approachable so they could pester me with questions and desires of friendship or romance, and I saved Bella from tripping after she had stuttered out her own introduction. For the looks on their faces, I could tell they realized just how different the new twin students were, and I was glad since it meant they would see us as individuals now. Mission complete, I thought smugly. I didn't bother remembering any faces and acted uninterested in them when they tried to approach, going so far as to ignore their existence when one of the people pestering Bella with questions was brave enough to try and ask me one. I frowned when Jessica made herself known and made herself out to be Bella's friend, giving me a once-over before apparently dismissing me as a freak and not even trying to suck up to me. I was pretty happy about that, as I really didn't like Jessica, especially after reading her vindictive thoughts in that partial draft of Midnight Sun on the author's website. I frowned when my sticking with Bella caused me to have to sit at the end of a full table with several of Jessica's friends, who she introduced to Bella and less enthusiastically to me. I forgot their names as soon as she spoke them, not bothering with any but Angela's. I'd had visions of us being really good friends, best friends even, and that made me more friendly with her. I smiled when she was the only one that didn't inch away from where I was sitting, sending me a polite smile, one I returned warmly, surprising her and a few others. It was there, sitting in the lunchroom, ignoring everyone's attempts at making conversation with me, except Angela. That first sight finally happened. Like in my vision, they were sitting in the corner of the cafeteria, as far away from where I sat as possible in the long room. I looked at the table in longing and envy. There were 4 of them, throwing me off before I quickly recovered and cut my thoughts before they could reveal anything. They weren't talking and they weren't eating, though they each had a tray of untouched food in front of them. They weren't gawking at us like the rest of the student body, so it was safe to stare at them. Not that I cared if they caught me or not. I do what I want. They looked nothing alike, and I was momentarily dazed at just how attractive they were. The books and movies didn't do them justice at all. I focused on their appearances rather than identifying them, struggling at not thinking of their names. There were 3 boys and 1 girl, and I felt a stab of sympathy for Rare, the girl being outnumbered as she was in their little group. One of the boys was big-muscled like a serious weightlifter, with dark curly hair. Another was lanky, less bulky, with untidy bronze-colored hair, and the last was taller, leaner, but still muscular and honey blonde. The last had my breath catch in my throat. My emotions jumbled as I didn't know what to feel at the moment, much less what to think, and I was kind of glad for it, because I would have surely given everything away if I could think straight. I barely even gave the girl a second glance, noting that she looked like a swimsuit model and had golden blonde hair, and that's it. My eyes were completely riveted by the honey blonde. I took notice of their pale skin, dark eyes, and the dark purplish shadows beneath them. I started to recite poetry in my head to calm myself down, and also act as a front as I thought on more revealing matters. If I remembered correctly, Jasper was currently suffering right now because it had been a while since they fed. I tried not to worry as I sifted through his future, trying to see if he'd be alright, switching to songs in Japanese and Spanish at the forefront of my thoughts. Nothing. Jasper did fine. It was Edward that almost snapped. I saw countless visions of him killing Bella and the rest of the class, me included, but also just as many visions of him acting like Bella was a leper and leaving abruptly and rudely at the end of class in minutely different ways. I shrugged off my unease and worry, knowing that Edward would pull through and that I wasn't going to die today, and shifted my attention to Bella, letting my thoughts revolve around her and bland things like what we were going to have for dinner tonight and how long it would take me to finish the homework that had already been assigned. "Who are they?" Bella asked Jessica, making me turn back to the inhumanly beautiful group. My eyes locking on the honey blonde again, almost as if I couldn't help it. Suddenly the bronze-haired one looked up, as if his name was called, and I became alert, knowing that he would start paying attention. He looked at Jessica for a moment, then me, before his eyes locked onto Bella. Then he looked away quickly, more quickly than Bella could, and I snickered when she flushed in embarrassment, making her give me a small glare. Jessica giggled in embarrassment as well, looking at their table. "That's Edward and Emmett Cullen and Rosie and Jasper Hale. They all live together with Dr. Cullen and his wife," she said under her breath. "Jasper," I breathed out in my thoughts, my curiosity and wonder flaring. Then, just like Edward, his head seemed to jerk up involuntarily as if he couldn't help it. But unlike Edward, he didn't look away, trapping me in his intense gaze. I stared into his flat black eyes, completely shameless at being caught, my emotions overwhelmingly calm, curious, and thoughtful. And if I wasn't seeing things, I thought I saw him relax minutely before he looked away again. My attention turned back to Bella when she spoke again. "They are very nice looking," Bella said, struggling with the statement. I rolled my eyes at her. "Yes," Jessica agreed with another giggle. "They're together, though. Emmett and Rosier, that is. And they live together. Her voice held all the shock and condemnation of the small town. I frowned, entirely unhappy and displeased with the way Jessica was trying to scandalize the group. Humans, I became amused when I saw Edward stiffen from the corner of my eye, always seemed to drag anyone better than them through the mud to try and bring them down to their level. I finished thinking, making him relax minutely again. "Which ones are the Cullens?" Bella asked. "They don't look related." "Of course not. They're probably adopted," I thought, not unkindly though. "Oh, they're not. Dr. Cullen is really young, in his 20s or early 30s. They're all adopted. The Hales are brother and sister, twins, the Blondes and their foster children." "Yeah, twins, like Bella and I. They look a little old for foster children. They are now, Jasper and Rosie are both 18, but they've been with Mrs. Cullen since they were 8. She's their aunt or something like that." I again frowned at the condescending and dismissive tone in Jessica's voice. I feel like someday she's just going to say something that sets me off and I'm going to end up smacking her. I glanced at Edward and noticed his lip quirk up the slightest bit. I ignored it and thought of other things. It's really kind of nice for them to take care of all those kids like that when they're so young and everything. "You go, Bella." "I guess so," Jessica admitted reluctantly, not wanting to admit to them doing anything good. "I think that Mrs. Cullen can't have kids, though." It was then I spoke to Jessica for the first time. "How does that lessen the generosity and kindness she's shown, Jessica?" I asked her coldly, and while she looked indignant at being called out, I knew that she wouldn't be able to explain herself without seeming as shallow and cruel as I knew she really was. Bella, always the one to try and settle things, diverted Jessica's attention with another question. "Have they always lived in Forks?" I rolled my eyes at her and answered instead of Jessica. "No, they moved here 2 years ago from somewhere in Alaska," I informed Bella, surprising her and making Jessica look at me snidely. "How do you know?" she bit out. I scoffed at her, not bothering to feel insulted. "I spend every summer here with my dad. A family as unique as them got a lot of people talking." "The end," I retorted smartly, making Jessica fume silently. After a tense silence, Bella lost in her own thoughts. She spoke up again. I noticed when Edward returned his attention to her. "Which one is the boy with the reddish-brown hair?" Bella asked, glancing at him to see that he was staring at her, looking frustrated for some reason. "That's Edward. The taller one is Jasper. They're gorgeous, of course, but don't waste your time. They don't date. Apparently none of the girls here are good-looking enough for them." She sniffed. I snickered, making her glare harshly at me when Bella turned away. Obviously, she went for them and failed. Please, anyone with half a brain would see that she's a scheming, vindictive tramp. I guess that means those guys actually have a brain upstairs as well. I thought in amusement, glancing at Edward and Jasper like Bella did, and saw that Jasper was smirking a little. No doubt like Edward was too. After a few more minutes, the four of them left the table together, looking entirely too graceful, even Emmett. It was kind of funny, actually. I left earlier than Bella, not sticking around to converse save to discreetly give Angela my number. She had offered to go with me since we had Biology 2 together, but I told her to accompany Bella instead, as she'd appreciate the company more than I would at the moment. When class was getting underway, I noticed that Angela and Edward were the only ones without partners. Something else done to accommodate my presence, no doubt. I was partnered with Angela and Bella with Edward. It was a difficult class for me. Not because of the lab we had to do, but because of all the visions I had to hide from Edward as he went through his whole decision of whether or not to kill her. At this point, I knew that he knew I could see visions of the future. I'd flashed a few mundane ones during lunch when I had looked to see what we would have for dinner tonight and how long it'd take me to do my homework. So I started to let through a few harmless visions that showed him walking out of this classroom, everyone inside still alive. I saw from the corner of my eye that he seemed less tense, though he had still stopped breathing, and that he seemed resolute, as if my visions helped him consciously decide that he wasn't going to kill everyone in the room. I resisted the urge to let out a sigh of relief when the bell rang, admittedly more than glad that I was still alive. I quickly made my way over to Bella, as I didn't want Mike to be the one to escort her to our next. I knew Mike would try to help her during gym, but I had more experience in doing so than he did. It'd be safer for everyone if I did it myself. "Do you need help finding you next class?" I heard him ask, and before Bella could give away that it was the same as his, I interrupted. "No thanks. I already know where it is, so you don't have to worry about us." And before either of them could protest, I whisked Bella away quickly, trying to get out of sight before I let the pace fall back to a slow walk. "Don't worry about Edward, Bella. He wasn't feeling well today. He'll act nicer after today. I assured her, leaving out that she wouldn't see him again in a few days after they meet in the main office. Bella seemed both relieved and disbelieving at the reassurance, which made sense as Edward had acted pretty crazy rude. I was glad that Coach Clapp didn't make us participate on the first day, allowing my thoughts to wander until the bell rang. Bella walked to the front office to return the paperwork, hurrying a little because it had started getting windy when the rain stopped. When we walked into the office, I could see that Bella wanted to turn right around, but didn't. Of course, Edward Cullen was right there, trying to convince Mrs. Cope to switch him out of biology. It was when the door opened again that I was hit with visions of Edward driving to Alaska and spending time with a family that looked like them in the sense that they had pale skin and dark circles under their eyes and were devastatingly attractive. Edward had stiffened the same moment I was hit with the visions, and he turned to give Bella a hate-filled glance, then turned to me with a glaring, thoughtful look before turning back to Mrs. Cope. "Never mind then," he said hastily. "I can see that it's impossible. Thank you so much for your help." And he turned on his heel without another look at us and disappeared out the door. I hovered over Bella as we made our way to the desk, her face pale white, no doubt from the fright of being the source of Edward's hatred, and handed her the signed slips. "How did your first day go, dears?" she asked maternally. "Fine," Bella lied weakly. She didn't look convinced. I put my hand on her shoulder and gave Mrs. Cope a bright, innocent smile. "It's been a long day. Bella's just a little tired." "Our first day was great. Thank you for asking," I said politely, warmly. Her cheeks flushed with pleasure at being thanked for her question, and she gave us a warm goodbye as we left. I hugged Bella to my side and rubbed her arm in comfort as we made our way to the parking lot. "Will you be fine driving home by yourself?" I asked softly. She just nodded weakly, not even speaking, as I gave her one more squeeze before letting go and going to my own car while she went to hers. Well, it was a great day for me. I established myself as an unsociable freak, and I got to see Jasper, but Bella obviously was not so great. I felt sorry for her, but knew I couldn't do anything to help her. Edward would have to do that when he got back. The next day was just as nice as the first one, for me. Because Edward was in Alaska, I didn't have to guard my thoughts at all, which was always nice. I prevented Mike from sitting next to Bella in English since I always sat next to her. He also had a harder time chatting her up with me there when he walked us next to our next class with Eric, who much to my mortification was hitting on me. He glared at Mike when he started doing the same whenever Bella unknowingly rebuffed his advances. People didn't stare quite as much as yesterday, already the new students losing their interest. I was once again forced to sit with the big group at lunch since Bella was pushed to eat there too. It was nice because I managed to help out Bella intrigue and to keep her from hurting anyone, including herself, during gym when we played volleyball, but I couldn't do anything about the fact that Edward wasn't there. I knew she'd be strangely disappointed. He wasn't there, relieved but also disappointed. Even after Bella turned away from the three Cullens, I did not, even as Mike steered us to their table. I stared more at the table than them in longing. It was practically empty, and I would appreciate the space and mere solitude. My attention locked on Jasper when he looked up at me in confusion, obviously wondering why the heck I was staring at a table in longing. I sighed and jerked my head in the direction of my noisy lunch group and discreetly elbowed at Eric, who was getting too close for comfort, before shaking my head, irritated. He seemed surprised that I responded to his unasked questions, before smirking a little at my silent answer. I wondered at his better mood and noted that his eyes were a well-fed amber. He must have fed last night. I felt satisfied that he was having an easier time, though he probably took it as satisfaction that I had gotten my message across. Biology passed by, Mike having spoken about the beach trip to La Push before the start of class. And then me saving Bella and others from pain when I partnered with her for volleyball. Bella and I separated to get to our cars, and my mood openly lifted when I saw the Cullens about to get into Edward's Volvo. Jasper's head visibly jerked up at that moment and locked his eyes with mine, obviously having felt my spike in emotion, or at least that's what I assumed. I just gave a warm, friendly, familiar smile and waved cheerfully at them, confusing Jasper, making Rosie scowl and Emmett laugh boisterously before waving back. Then they got in the car and left. I sighed as they left, sad they were leaving, but pretty happy with the little progress I made. I mean, I didn't expect Jasper to even look at me so soon, much less acknowledge me at all. The rest of the week was much the same, save for my silent interactions with the Cullens during lunch. I progressively sent more and more silent messages, like the first time to Jasper, to the point where they were basically conversations, and even got Emmett and Rosie to participate, even if the latter was mostly eye rolls and scowls. They lessened as the week went by, and she even started showing sparks of interest when I showcased designer shoes and jackets. I'd also made progress befriending Angela, which was fairly easy, as she was a kind soul, and we were lab partners. We even started hanging out a little outside of school, even though we mostly talked about schoolwork and the like, but we'd started branching into fashion and personal interests. Even though I was happy with how things were going so far, I still couldn't wait until Monday, when Edward would be back. Sure, I wasn't looking forward to having to watch my thoughts again, but him coming back meant that events could move forward again. The sooner Edward interacted with Bella, the sooner I could interact with Jasper, well, interact with him more, as in actually speak to him. The rain was soft over the weekend, and I spent most of it staring out my window at the rain, feeling subdued since I had no reason to be happy. It wasn't Monday yet, after all. People greeted Bella enthusiastically in the parking lot Monday, and less enthusiastically at me, since it would be rude to just not greet me. It was colder this morning, but not raining, and I knew it meant that it was going to snow, if only for a little bit. Since Alice wasn't there to instigate the snowball fight between the Cullens, I would somehow have to. I figured I'd ditch Bella before lunch for once and get to the cafeteria early to see how I would do it. Imagine my surprise when I ran into them on their way to the cafeteria. Oh, look, Grumpy McGrumpstein is back. Did Mr. Hyde turn back to Dr. Jekyll over your little vacation? I asked cheerfully when I spotted Edward. Pure amusement in my thoughts. They all stared at my comment, the first thing I've spoken to any of them, before Emmett burst out laughing and Jasper smirked. Edward just looked too stunned to feel insulted. I told you you're not as scary as you think you are. Emmett said before guffawing again. Don't worry, Jekyll, Bella keeps to herself, so your reputation hasn't been smeared beyond being a ridiculously attractive bachelor. That's not interested in bubble-headed girls, I told him. The only reason I know is because I'm her twin, I said just as cheerfully as before, getting a lot of amusement from Edward's expressions. I knew you were funny from last week, but hearing you talk is way better. Emmett said good-naturedly. You're an all-right chick, he said with a chuckle. I laughed at that comment. Ah, thanks, Big Bear. It warms my heart to know you like me, I said with false sincerity, making him laugh boisterously again. Sit with us, he suddenly said, an invitation, making Rosie early whip her head to him and even made Edward jerk in surprise. Emmett, Rosie hissed fiercely under her breath. Emmett just chuckled at her. Come on, babe. She's totally interesting, and you know you've been dying to ask her about those shoes and jackets she wears. Emmett didn't even make a sound when Rosie elbowed him hard in the side, laughing instead. Sure, I'll take you up on the offer. Sitting with you guys will give me some elbow room and keep away anyone that wants to talk to me, I said happily, completely cheered by the idea. This is going to be the first time in a week that these vultures won't bother me, I thought, making Edward's lips quirk and Jasper smirk as they read my thoughts and felt my emotions respectively. This'll also help me time this perfectly for when Bella comes in. Edward stiffened at that thought and discreetly looked at me sharply, wondering what I was up to. Emmett and I bantered back and forth like old friends, as we all sat down and Rosie Evan joined the conversation when she finally couldn't resist asking about the shoes I was wearing today. My head suddenly jerked to the entrance to the cafeteria, when a vision flitted through my inner thoughts, successfully masking them from Edward. Oh, Bella's coming. How do you know? Rosie asked suspiciously, obviously trying to get me to confess to my superpower. I shrugged at the question casually. Twin thing, Emmett snorted at my easy deflection, while Edward and Jasper smirked. Sure enough, Bella walked in with Jessica and just as she routinely did, checked the Cullen table. She stopped when she spotted me, and I gave her a friendly wave. But she froze when she saw that there were 5 people sitting at the table, the 5th sitting next to me, Jasper on my other side, and Emmett and Rosie across from us. She had seen Edward. I frowned at how unconcerned Jessica was, at how suddenly ill-looking Bella became. I looked at Edward after he had glanced at Bella going to her table, only having bought a soda. You look sick, Jekyll. You're not about to run off and turn into Mr. Hyde, are you? I asked in false concern, taunting him almost. Emmett's boisterous laughter kept him from responding. I felt the moment about to happen, and discreetly took out a canister full of snow. I collected earlier in case of this moment, quickly forming a snowball and ignoring the strange looks I was getting from Edward and Jasper. I made Emmett laugh again and threw my snowball straight into his face, as soon as he closed his eyes, as he laughed, making him splutter out the snow that made its way into his mouth and making Rosia laugh at him. When he wiped the rest of it off his face, he looked at me incredulously, but I just pointed accusingly at Edward, who looked a little affronted as I looked away innocently, which means in Jasper's direction, who was currently looking very amused. Emmett obviously didn't buy it and grinned in anticipation. "You asked for it," he said, as he leaned across the table and shook his snow-encrusted hair in my direction. Of course some of it went in Rosie's direction too, and she voiced her complaint. "You?" Rosia voiced as both she and I recoiled from the deluge, Jasper allowing me to pull him partially in front of me to act as a shield. On instinct, I laughed and they all joined in. Perfect, I thought with a mental smirk. My vision of this exact moment appearing in the forefront of my mind, and I could see Edward's eyes light with understanding and realization, because at that moment, Bella had looked up from her table at us and saw a scene that made them look like everyone else. I kept laughing, still partially using Jasper as a shield, who was surprisingly grinning and holding up his arm to help shield me. Bella was still watching after all. I let the scene go when Edward's head snapped to Bella and examined Edward for a moment, ignoring his siblings' stares as I did so. I shrugged, letting it go, and turning to Jasper with a bright, warm smile, giving him a mock salute. "Thank you, Sir Jasper, for acting as my meat shad from that fiendish big bear," I said jokingly, but sincerely. Emmett only laughed. Rosalie rolled her eyes, and Jasper gave a wry grin. "Anytime, Lady Madeline," he said with a small mock bow. My smile turned more gentle, warmer, as I lifted my hand up to lightly ruffle his damp hair, shaking some water droplets, surprising him and making him stiffen. But he relaxed when I focused intently on my calm, relaxed emotions. "You can call me Maddie," I sniffed and turned to Emmett and Rosalie then, mock disdain in my voice when I addressed them as well. "I suppose you peasants, well, peasant and lady can call me Maddie as well." Rosalie scoffed, but I could see that her lips twitched a bit with a smile, while Emmett just laughed. "So Maddie, what brought you to Forks?" Emmett asked in interest. I shrugged. "I came because I preferred my dad, rain and clouds, to my mother, sun and dry heat. My mom tends to hover, and Bella and I tend to take care of her more than she does us. Charlie is more laid back and leaves me to my solitude," I answered easily, "and for myself." They didn't ask about Bella, and I didn't offer anything. "What do you do in your free time?" Jasper asked, surprising me a little. I thought on it, tapping my finger on my chin thoughtfully. Let's see. I like reading, drawing, shopping, watching TV, taking pictures of scenery, decorating, and spacing out for hours at a time. Though I prefer to call it meditation. I said the last word with air quotes, making Emmett laugh again. "It was pretty easy." "Where do you do your shopping?" Rosie asked. I rested my chin in the palm of my hand, my elbow leaning on the tabletop. "I do it all online. It's easier to get custom sizes that way, and they always have better deals while still having all the perks of designer," I answered easily, making Rosie look thoughtful. "What do you watch on TV?" Emmett asked this time. I shrugged. "Shows that teach you to commit a crime mostly, like Psycho Monk, Burn Notice, Sherlock, but I also like to watch things like Sleepy Hollow, House, Restaurant Impossible, Face Off, and even something as pointless as Ridiculousness. That last one always has me either cringing in disgust or laughing until my stomach hurts." "What's that last one about?" Emmett asked, not having heard of it apparently. "A presentation of internet videos of people doing ridiculously stupid things with Rob Dyrdek hosting it." "The guy from Fantasy Factory?" Emmett asked, partially excited. "Yup, one and the same. Chanel and Steel O'Brim are on the show too." Emmett grinned. "Awesome, I'll have to check it out." I sent Rosie an apologetic grin after she rolled her eyes at his enthusiasm. "What about books?" Jasper asked, bringing my attention to him, my emotions warming and calming the smallest bit. "Oh, you know, strange and varied things from the Satanic Bible, the complete works of William Shakespeare, and the Divine Comedy, to stuff like Dan Brown, the Harry Potter series, and the Inheritance Cycle. I also read and watch anime and manga and historical K-dramas." The three of them looked at me strangely before Emmett burst out into boisterous laughter, guffawing loudly and making more than a few people look at him strangely. "Dude, this chick is awesome!" He quickly quieted and sent a large, suggestive grin at Rosier. "But not as awesome as you, babe." While Emmett distracted himself with Rosier, Jasper turned to me with an amused smile. "You certainly have unique tastes," he said. "What gave it away?" I said teasingly. My apparel, my taste in books and TV, or my sparkling personality? I asked jokingly. He didn't get the chance to answer when the bell rang. I was the only one to get up, the others looking to see what Edward would do. I broke the tense silence easily. I'll see you in bio, Edward. As for you, I turned to Jasper in an exaggerated and flirtatious way, giving him an exaggerated wink as well. I hope to see you later. Then my expression immediately turned bland when I looked to the only couple at the table, and I suppose I'll see you two later as well. Rosie only scoffed as Emmett chuckled. Only in your dreams, Rosie said snidely, though there was no real bite to them. I responded anyways. Don't flatter yourself, babe, I replied, borrowing Emmett's pet name and making him laugh as I practically skipped away from them, extremely happy at how well things went. The rest of the day was pretty uneventful for me, painfully so, as the rest of the exciting things that would happen today would happen to Bella, i.e. her conversation with Edward in bio and Edward nearly causing Bella to get into an accident in the parking lot. I was more concerned with what I knew was going to happen tomorrow, but didn't dwell on it as I was still in Edward's range. I would worry about it when I got home. It was bright in the morning, and when I looked out the window, I saw why. It was snowing, like I knew it would. I sighed and got ready for school. Sometimes knowing the future sucked. It was so boring to know nearly everything beforehand. Nothing truly unexpected ever happened. Small things that surprised me made me way happier than they should, just because it took me by surprise. Events I'd foreseen still excited me when they happened though, but not really surprising. I knew what I was going to do today, even if I hadn't seen it. Though, Alice hadn't seen Tyler's crash because it was a split-second decision on his part. So it was obvious I wouldn't be able to see it either. But I knew it would happen today, and I knew it would be the first time that I ride with Bella just so that I'd be there to push her away when it happened. Edward would come save her regardless of my presence. I knew that even without seeing the vision, what I didn't know was if I'd make it unscathed through the accident or even if I'd survive. I knew that she'd be fine if I wasn't there. But after nearly 17 years of protecting her from accidents, it was hard to let go of the habit, and it felt completely wrong to just leave it so against my better judgment. I decided to hitch a ride with Bella. Both Charlie and Bella were surprised at the announcement during breakfast, but didn't question it as they were used to me doing random or out-of-character things sometimes. Bella actually kept glancing at me in concern during her slow drive to school, most likely surprised that I wasn't teasing her because of her overcautious speed, or lack thereof, and was more subdued than usual. Finally, we got to school, and I quickly and carefully made my way over to Bella's side, staring at her worriedly, as she was overcome with emotion after looking at the snow chains. Charlie had put on her tires. It was then that I heard the foreign but sickeningly familiar sound, the high-pitched screeching. My eyes snapped up to its source and immediately spotted Tyler's dark blue van. My eyes darted to where I had glimpsed Edward's shiny Volvo, and was mildly surprised to see that not only was Edward looking on in growing horror, but so was Jasper. Strange, I thought he left with the others, but my focus wasn't on that, it was on the van and the prime position Bella was in, to be crushed by it. Unlike almost every other moment of my waking life, I acted before I thought. I had intended to tackle Bella out of the way to get us both out of harm's way, but my mind did not register my plan. My instincts overruling reason and instead making me shove her aside, so I replaced her while she fell to the ground in a safe zone. The events did not go in slow motion for me like they did for Bella. Everything was fast and blurred together. Faster than I could comprehend. Edward was at Bella's side, checking her head from where it had audibly cracked against the ground, and I was being pinned in a cold marble embrace. The sounds of the van colliding with something seemed muted in my ears as my disoriented eyes focused on the cold, hard figure holding me. I was floored when I saw it was Jasper holding me tightly to him with one arm, the other holding up the van with a superhuman grip. The van was inches from my face, Jasper the only thing that kept it from touching me. Then I was whipped around until I was laying protectively behind Jasper, and he dropped the van with a groaning metallic thud that rang in my ears, the glass popping and landing on the asphalt where my legs had been a second ago. Silence stretched between the four of us, my thoughts and emotions too incoherent for the two vampires to understand, before the first scream started. Suddenly, the air was filled with shouts of Bella and I's names, but they were white noise in the background compared to Edward's first words. "Bella, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Bella croaked out strangely. I would have craned my neck to her, but my eyes were trapped in Jasper's intense gaze. so full of emotions I couldn't place before they shifted again, and the first thought that came to mind popped out of my mouth. "Jasper, are you okay?" I asked worriedly, concern and fear apparent in my tone, even without him needing to read my emotions. I thought shallowly of the chaos around us, while really thinking of how quickly his eyes had darkened. No doubt from being so close to Tyler, who was probably littered with shallow cuts. He looked absolutely stunned for a moment before smiling at me in worry and exasperation. "I should be asking you that, Maddie," he said rather softly, making me look at him in wonder. "Well, I am rather dazed, but it doesn't really have to do with the accident," I breathed out quietly. Again, he looked absolutely shocked before he allowed himself to relax minutely and let out a low chuckle. "I don't know if I should be concerned or happy that that's the only thing on your mind." I was about to answer when a shout interrupted me. "Don't move," someone instructed. "Get Tyler out of the van." Someone else shouted. Jasper slowly settled me into a more comfortable sitting position, but Edward and Bella were in the most spacious area of the cramped space. So I ended up partially sitting in Jasper's lap, my back on his chest, and his arms wrapped uncertainly around my waist. I snuggled back into him shamelessly, not minding the cold and feeling his chuckle rumble in his chest before I heard it. His humor abruptly vanished when what Bella said next caught her attention. "You were over there," I sighed in frustration at Bella. "You were by your car." Edward's expression turned hard. "No, I wasn't." "I saw you." The chaos continued to be white noise to me as I glared exasperatedly at Bella. "Bella, they were standing right next to us, and Jasper pulled me out of the way after I pushed you while Edward checked on you," I said resolutely, in a tone that spoke that I didn't want to argue about it. Bella looked at me in shock and disbelief, and a little bit of betrayal and hurt, while Edward just looked at me, stunned, surprised that I was helping them. "No," Bella said stubbornly, setting her jaw. This time, it was my turn to feel hurt, as she didn't let it go, and I turned away from her as Edward pleaded with Bella. I felt Jasper's hand squeeze my waist lightly and looked up to see him giving me a small, comforting smile. "Sorry," I murmured under my breath so Bella wouldn't hear it. "Sometimes she's too stubborn for her own good. She also has a hard time knowing when to just be grateful and keep her mouth shut." I muttered a little more annoyed and miffed. I felt the emotions gradually slip away into a sense of calm, without my wanting them to, and knew it was Jasper. "It's fine. You can't control your sister. We're the ones that chose to help you, but I have to wonder why." "Fine," Edward snapped, making Jasper and I turn to Edward in surprise. "Fine," Bella repeated angrily. "What just happened?" I whispered to Jasper, even though I already knew, but Edward and Jasper didn't know that, as my foremost thoughts were on Bella's and Jasper's well-being and how bothersome it was going to be to go to the hospital. "Bella just forced Edward to promise her that he would explain everything later," Jasper whispered in my ear, making Edward glare sharply at him. I scoffed at both Jasper's reply and Edward's glare. "Like he's going to keep that promise," I muttered under my breath, making Edward's glare turn to me. I just rolled my eyes at him. "Your glare doesn't scare me, Mr. Hyde," I thought, snidely disliking that he chose to glare at me, though I liked how Jasper's arms tightened around my waist in response to it. It took 6 EMTs and 2 teachers to pull the van far enough away from us to bring the stretchers in. Edward, Jasper, and I vehemently refused ours, and Bella tried to do the same, but both Edward and I mentioned that she hit her head and probably had a concussion. I nearly laughed aloud when they slapped the neck brace on her and loaded her in the ambulance, Edward riding in the front while Jasper and I sat in the back with Bella, getting a kick whenever she sent me an accusing glare. "Maddie!" Charlie had arrived before the ambulance could leave. He looked relieved to see me relatively unharmed, but panicked when he saw who was laying on the stretcher. "Bella, I'm completely fine, Chair Dad," Bella sighed. "There's nothing wrong with me." He turned to the closest EMT for a second opinion. I thought back to Emmett's and Rosie's expressions. Emmett looked across between disapproving and concerned, and Rosalie looked furious and minutely concerned. I was happy when I was cleared before I even got to the hospital, the only noticeable injury being a baseball-sized bruise on my hip bone, no doubt where it collided with Jasper's body when he pulled me against him. I smiled smugly at Bella when she glared at me after the EMTs clearing me, but my smile morphed to something warmer when I noticed Jasper giving me an apologetic look, obviously knowing the single injury on my person was his fault. I looked at him reassuringly, gratefully, letting him know without saying it that I didn't blame him and was grateful that he saved my life. I followed after Bella into the emergency room, snickering when she took off the neck brace as soon as the nurse left. Soon enough, Tyler was wheeled in too, and I practically felt Jasper tense behind me, as close as he was without actually touching me. I looked up over my shoulder at him and reached my hand back to hold his comfortingly, giving it a small squeeze as I let my more calm and soothing emotions wash over me. He seemed to visibly relax at this, despite his near-flat black eyes, and gently squeezed my hand back, looking down at me intently and not letting go. "Bella, I'm so sorry." Tyler's apology brought my attention back to him. "I'm fine, Tyler. You look awful. Are you all right?" As they spoke, nurses unwound his soiled bandages, and I felt the pressure on my hand tighten just the slightest bit. I redoubled my efforts to stay calm, thinking of the serenity I felt when I hiked in the forestry of Forks in past summers, thinking back on the sound of creeks and waterfalls and birdsong. I felt the overwhelming sense of peace that the images usually brought with it, and felt Jasper responding to it. It was then Tyler saw me. "I'm sorry, Maddie." I stiffened a little when he used my nickname, not recalling giving him permission to do so, but he continued blathering to me. "I thought I was gonna kill y'all, but then you pushed her out of the way, and I thought I was gonna kill you instead. I was going too fast, and I hit the ice wrong." "Don't worry about it," I said, shrugging off his panicked apology. "I'm not dead, nor injured, and you're worse off than I am." "The universe has righted itself," I said casually. He blinked as he slowly registered what I said, then kept talking. "How did you get out of the way so fast?" "You were there and then you were gone." "Jasper pulled me out of the way," I replied easily, not missing a beat and sending Jasper my gratitude via emotions. He looked confused. "Who?" I rolled my eyes at him. "Jasper Cullen?" "He's standing right behind me, and he was standing right next to me," I informed him, my voice properly exasperated. I'd always been a much better liar than Bella. Actress worthy. Drama club at our old school helped. I didn't bother telling him about Edward. No need to make it more suspicious. "Cullen, I didn't see him." "Wow, it was all so fast, I guess." He glanced at Jasper, a little nervous and intimidated. "Are you okay?" I looked up to see Jasper nod sharply. "No blood, no foul. I'm completely fine. I was cleared along with Maddie before we even got to the hospital." Jasper informed the boy. It was then that they wheeled Bella away and shooed Jasper and me out of the emergency room and into the waiting claws of nearly the entire school. I refrained from groaning when they all started to question me at once, too intimidated by Jasper behind me to question him. Some clipped, harsh words later, and no one bothered to speak to me anymore, except Charlie and Angela, who I warmly reassured. After they were done interrogating me, I immediately wanted to go home, but I knew Charlie wouldn't leave without Bella. I contemplated my options as I wandered to a more deserted waiting room, not noticing that Jasper had followed. "Why don't you question what happened like your sister?" Jasper asked in a low voice, startling me and making me whirl around to face him. I grabbed my frantically beating heart and looked at him reproachfully. "Can you not do that? I know we're in a hospital, but that is no reason to try and give me a heart attack," I scolded, but he didn't budge at my humor like usual, focused on his question. "Why don't you question what we did today?" he repeated to me intensely. I let my teasing pretenses fade as I looked at him more seriously, thoughtfully. I hugged my waist, looking to where my hand pressed lightly against the bruise. Jasper had accidentally given me. "You saved my life, Jasper," I whispered softly. "I have no right to interrogate you like Bella is no doubt trying to do with Edward. She wouldn't tell anyone even if she knew. But she has yet to learn that people have secrets they'd rather not let anyone know," I said a little louder, but no higher in volume than a mutter. "Are you speaking from experience, or because you know already?" Jasper questioned. Technically it was both, but I wasn't going to tell him that quite yet. I didn't want to scare him off. "Would it matter either way?" I asked him with a smile, looking straight into his eyes when I said it. He seemed ready to respond when something in my eyes must have made him hesitate. I don't believe it would." "We wouldn't care if you had your own secret, and you wouldn't be inclined to tell anyone ours if you knew. At least I believe that is the kind of person both you and your sister are from what little I've observed of you," he said carefully, as if thoroughly thinking his answer through. "But aren't you the least bit curious?" he asked, apparently having a hard time believing I'd just let it go. "Of course I'm curious, Jazz," I said, using the endearment for the first time, "but I'm leaving it up to you or your family on whether to tell me or not. If you decide to reveal it to me, that's great. But if you don't, that's fine too. I'm not going to ruin my relationship with you guys just to satisfy my curiosity," I told him softly, letting him feel the sincerity in my statement, and it was obvious he did, if his relaxing and looking at me in wonder was any indication. "What if I told you I wanted to tell you right now, Jasper asked, surprising me. I hadn't seen this conversation happen, so it must have been a split decision on Jasper's part. Suddenly I had a vision of Jasper picking me up at home, of him revealing his family's secret on the drive to school, of me telling him about my visions of the future and that I knew about them from the beginning. Then there was an opposing one where Jasper still picks me up but tells me nothing of his family's secret, instead asking me about myself and getting to know me better, but seemingly hesitant, still holding back. So, my answer right now would take me down one of those paths, but which answer would bring the first vision? Having Major Jasper Whitlock in the know would seriously help take some of the pressure off me. It'd be nice to have someone else help me orchestrate things, especially when it got to more important events, and more importantly, it'd bring me that much closer to him. I wouldn't claim that I loved him, that would be silly, but I was getting close. Visions of us together, certainly not helping me, and I could already feel my affection for him growing the more time I spent with him, not that it was much, it being little more than a week. I would respond that I would like to know, but that this is a bad time, it being such a populated area where people could overhear us, and my dad will probably come looking for me soon. I answered carefully. My forethoughts focused on Bella's predicament, as I hoped that Edward had his hands full focusing on Bella. He seemed to contemplate my carefully spoken words and nodded sharply, decisively, the vision of him telling me the truth solidifying in my mind, the other erased like chalk from a board. You're right, he took a step closer. The action deliberate and intimate as it brought us almost chest to chest. If I breathed too deeply, I would brush against him. I would like to offer you a ride to school tomorrow morning. Is that all right? Jasper asked in a low, intense voice, his eyes staring intently into mine and letting me experience, for the first time, the full, dazzling effect of a vampire. My breath caught and I swallowed dryly before I managed to answer. Of course, I would have said yes even without the dazzling, but wow, I sure didn't mind the extra effort. His expression softened, not as intense as before, but still rather overwhelming. His hand slowly lifted and brushed back the strands that partially hid my left eye, letting the locks slide through his fingers and back to my face, as neat as it was before. Great, he murmured. I'll be there bright and early. And with those final words, he slid by me and left me there, spacey and dazed, until Charlie and Bella came to find me to go home. I was in an annoyingly elated mood for the rest of the day, irritating Bella and confusing Charlie for good reason, but I didn't care. I practically skipped to my room and wasn't even all that irked when I had to call Renee because Charlie told her about the accident. Seriously, she should be used to these kinds of things by now. I went to bed earlier than usual that night, wanting to get a good night's rest in order to be properly awake and ready when Jasper came tomorrow, and hopefully before Charlie and Bella realized I had even been driven to school by someone else. That night, once I had finally put myself to sleep through meditation, I dreamed pleasantly of Jasper. My dreams were too vivid for me to call dreams, so I assumed they were visions I had while I was asleep. They were of small, random moments with Jasper, most of them being of me as a vampire. So I assumed that this was in the far future, not that I minded all that much. Sometimes I thought I could see other people on the edges of the vision, but I could never identify them before the vision changed or I woke up. I assumed that it was the other Cullens since it made the most sense, but I wondered. I never dwelled on it as I liked my dreams of Jasper and didn't want to try and change it. The month that followed the accident felt just as sweet as my dreams, but for a different reason. Jasper wasn't sweet and familiar and intimate with me like he was in my dreams. It was more like the courting phase that led up to it, and that in itself was sweet. It was really cute seeing the handsome Major Jasper Whitlock hesitate and fidget with his words and actions as he tried to handle his growing affections and display them to me. At first, I had thought that he'd have trouble accepting his affection for me because he might have felt, like Edward, that he was a monster undeserving of love, and unlike Edward, he'd have a reason for it, as his past was actually bloody and full of darkness. But it seemed that hurdle was passed on day one, the day that Jasper told me his family secret, and I had revealed mine. I looked in the mirror to carefully inspect my outfit. I'd gotten up extra early, eaten breakfast, taken a quick shower, brushed my teeth, blow-dried and styled my hair, and slipped into my clothes. My shattered jacket was waiting on my bed next to my Jack the Ripper bag. I fussed with the lace of my sleeveless purple bustier with metallic blue sheen and straps, a black floral print decorating it along with soutache braid ornaments, and the neck and waistline detailed with lace, the zipper in the back warming against my spine. This beauty was called Salvation. Riding snugly on my hips were black loop cotton jeans with drawstring detail. These were called Deathward. The ends of the jeans were tucked into black suede BCB generation Worcester wedge heel ankle booties. I smiled at myself, pleased with my appearance, and went to my bed, sliding on my jacket and bag and going over to my desk, taking a sheet from a small notepad and writing a quick note. Friend drove me to school. Don't worry about me. MHS. It was short and to the point, and very me so. They wouldn't be concerned about a false note and me being kidnapped. After all, I'm the only person I know that signs my name with my 3 initials. I skipped quietly to the kitchen to place my note there, and was pleased when I looked out the window and saw a shiny, expensive-looking black Jaguar waiting outside my house. That's definitely Jasper. I didn't think he had owned one of those in the book, but I was starting to dismiss most of the smaller discrepancies in the story, considering they were generally caused by my presence. I was also surprised that he wasn't kidding when he said early. Charlie wasn't even up yet. I shrugged and let it go, checking my pocket for my house key and my back pocket for my Jack the Ripper wallet that matched my bag before slipping out the front door. I jogged happily to his Jaguar. My emotions as bright as my smile probably was as I saw him leaning against the hood, waiting for me, no doubt to open the door for me, like a gentleman. Unable to tamper my excitement, I didn't slow as I got closer, instead slamming into him and giving him a hug, wrapping my arms tightly around his waist. Of course I didn't slam full force into him. I was careful. No need to hurt myself. I looked up in anticipation, but saw that he didn't look surprised at all. I pouted and pulled back a little, no longer snuggling, but keeping my arms around him. It's no fun if you're not surprised, I said, pout still in place. He chuckled and lightly placed his hands on my waist. I've learned to expect the unexpected from you, he replied, easily slipping out of my arms in a smooth motion, taking my hand and leading me to the passenger seat. He opened the door with the other hand and made a small sweeping motion. After you. I smiled at him as he continued to hold my hand as I got in the car, not letting go until I was sitting down, and only closed the door after I had buckled myself in. I pretended to be occupied with fixing my jacket so he could get to the driver's seat faster. Not even 10 seconds passed before the driver's seat door opened and I looked up at him with a raised brow. Well, that was pretty fast, I said teasingly, knowing it was part of what he was going to tell me. Obviously, he wouldn't have been able to save me if he wasn't faster than that. I have long legs, he replied with a wry grin.
I'm sure that's what you tell everyone, huh?
He started the car, the engine coming to life almost silently. More or less, he replied in amusement as he took off at ridiculous speeds. There was a comfortable silence for a moment before Jasper spoke again, this time more seriously. I'm having trouble finding a good place to start, Jasper said in a low voice. There are so many things I want to tell you. I don't know where to begin, he finished in a tight whisper. Why not begin with the secret you share with your family, and we'll go from there, I said encouragingly, letting my warmth seep into my words. He sent me a grateful look before taking a deep breath and starting. My family and I aren't exactly human. He peeked a glance at me to see if I made any reaction. Of course I didn't, so he continued slowly, carefully. We're what humans call vampires, he said, not seeing the point in beating around the bush. But not like the vampires of fiction, I said, as more statement than question. No, we're not averse to garlic. A cross doesn't harm us. Holy water doesn't affect us. The sun doesn't bother us, and a wooden stake would do nothing to us. We also don't sleep in coffins or turn into bats, he stated, listing off the more well-known lore of vampires, then went into more detail. We don't eat human food. We don't sleep, and while the sun doesn't affect us, it does reveal us to be inhuman. In what way? I asked curiously. Though I knew the answer, I wanted to know how he'd respond to the question. I wasn't disappointed either. He seemed to hesitate, as if he wasn't sure I'd believe him. I rolled my eyes good-naturedly. Could what you're about to say really be less believable than you being an insomniac vampire? I asked. His lip twitched in amusement before he decided to answer. We sparkle, he answered. I looked at him incredulously. I beg your pardon. His lip twitched again, though this time he seemed to feel no amusement. The sun reflects off our skin and makes us sparkle like a jewel does in the light. My lips trembled as I tried to contain my amusement. I see. I failed to keep it in and choked out a few laughs, struggling to contain it. I managed to contain myself when I noticed Jasper giving me an odd look. What? I asked, tilting my head to the side curiously. Your reactions to my telling the truth are strange, Jasper managed to answer. This time I didn't bother hiding my laughter. I wiped the tears from my eyes when I noticed that same look from before on his face. Come on, Jazz, you should know by now that I'm not exactly normal. Human, yes, but normal, no. I explained to him almost primly, making a smile tug at his lips. So if I told you that we drink blood, he trailed off, his tone light, but obviously guarded, as if expecting a harsh reaction. Do you really? Do you suck victims dry or leave them alive? Do you emit pleasure endorphins like in all those teen vampire books or something? Or maybe you take some kind of blood pill supplement instead? Or do you drink from those blood baggies like juice bags? Does Carlisle get them for you? He could, right? Because he's a doctor? Or maybe human blood doesn't really appeal to you. I can't imagine living off of blood and wanting to drink human blood. It must be so fatty now, with all the fast food and unhealthy junk we eat. It's like eating something off the floor. You don't know where it's been, I said, going from curious, ridiculous questions to a ridiculous, horrified explanation of why I wouldn't want to drink human blood. I stopped rambling partly to myself when I heard Jasper laugh outright, his confusion at my reaction morphing to amusement at my silly questions. Pleasure endorphins? Are there really books that say we do that? Jasper asked. I shrugged. Yeah, I only read them avidly, so I don't really remember details, as there was some ridiculous science mumbo-jumbo involved. But it basically said that when vampires bite their victim, it sets off pleasure endorphins in their head, so they go into this orgasmic trance and don't fight back. Jasper snorted at that. Do they also drink from blood bags and take blood pill supplements? I can't imagine cooled old blood being appetizing. Wouldn't it be lifeless by then? I laughed at that. Yeah, I think one of the vampires actually said something along the same lines when explaining it to someone. I paused for a bit before finally addressing what we were kind of avoiding. So you do drink blood? Do you kill your victims or leave them alive? Do you choose your victims or let your instincts guide you and choose arbitrarily? How does it work exactly? I asked curiously. No fear or disgust in my voice or emotions, just genuine curiosity and intrigue. Yes, we do drink blood, but our family, our coven, is different. We do not drink human blood. We jokingly call ourselves vegetarians because we instead choose to sate our thirst with animal blood. While not nearly as appetizing as human blood, it does mute the burn caused by our hunger. The only adverse effect it has on us is turning our eyes amber, gold, rather than the crimson red of human blood diet vampires. Jasper explained, beyond looking surprised at my reactions, or non-reactions as it were. I nodded in understanding. So that's why your eyes darkened yesterday, when you saved me. Being so close to a bleeding Tyler must have made your hunger burst into flames. You must have a lot of self-control. I praised easily, smiling a little at the very current memory of him saving my life. It was only because you were there that I could control myself, he said softly. I looked up at him in surprise. What do you mean? My breath caught when his eyes locked on mine, his eyes bright and intense with a flurry of emotions. I was more concerned for your safety and well-being to be focused or overwhelmed by the scent of his blood. Also, he broke eye contact, looking back to the road. Also, I prompted, very curious now. Also, your scent is very soothing. It calms me. I felt my cheeks heat up at that and I looked away, my hands clenching into fists. Enhanced senses, too. I'd have thought my scent would be bad for you, especially if I smell good. Doesn't it make the thirst burn more? I asked quietly, a little unsure now of being in his presence. In a closed car with the heat on, not because I was afraid he'd lose control, but because I was worried I was causing him pain. I'm getting used to it, he answered promptly, easily, making me look back at him incredulously. He flashed me a boyish grin that would have made my knees shake, were I standing. Besides, I enjoy your company more than I do your scent, and that makes it easier to ignore the thirst. My face heated further, and I raised my cold palms to them both, to hide them from Jasper and to try and cool them down. Sorry, I mumbled. This must not be helping, I said, almost shyly. Dang it! I'm not supposed to be shy. I don't mind. I peeked up at him and wished I hadn't, his happy grin making my heart stutter. I think it's cute. I looked away swiftly and squeezed my eyes closed as I frantically tried to calm myself down, making him chuckle at my reaction. No fair, I whined. You're a lot more open than I thought you'd be, I complained comically. After his laughter died down, I finally relaxed and let my hands fall back into my lap. So have you and your family always been vegetarians? I asked, knowing I had asked something he hadn't wanted me to when he stiffened. For the most part, yes, he hedged. I raised a brow. For the most part, he hesitated, shifting in his seat. There have been slip-ups and vengeance-seeking, but they have steadfastly remained vegetarians, Jasper explained. They? I questioned. Yes. He paused, and for a few seconds I thought he wasn't going to continue. I didn't have quite the same upbringing as my adopted siblings. I had heard of them from my nomadic friends when I wished to part ways and find a different life, and wished to join them. He explained vaguely. A different life, I asked softly, knowing that this was a pretty heavy conversation topic so early on. I was born into the vampire life very differently from my brothers and sisters. I was changed for the sake of war. One humans knew nothing about, but war nonetheless. I won't go into details, but for the first part of my new life, I was a ruthless soldier. I tore apart countless newborns as they attempted to do the same to me. When I did a good job, I was rewarded. These rewards mostly consisted of young or sweet-smelling blood. Not once, as he spoke, did he look at me. I took these rewards as they came, but felt remorseful as they came at the cost of the deaths of my enemies. The death of our own armies, as it was my job to dispose of newborns when they got older and lost their strength. I lived like that for so long, and until I met him, I didn't know there was another way to live. His countenance brightened a little at his mention. At first he was just a newborn that would incessantly pester me and refuse to leave me alone, insisting on keeping me company. I laughed a little, making a smile tug at his lips. Eventually he brought out emotions in me that I long thought dead. He revived my humanity, made me see just what I had become, and he gave me a way out. I convinced my leader that he was useful beyond being a newborn, and she allowed him to love. Later, I had let him and a newborn I was supposed to dispose of escape. The two had become mates. My creator was furious, fearful, and mistrustful of me when she found out and began plotting my demise. I likewise did the same as I thought it was the only option. Sometime later, he came back. He and his mate came to me, both healthy and happy, and told me that there was no need to continue living like this, that there were other paths I could take. I went with them immediately. I traveled with the two for a time, but still felt the same emptiness as before. I no longer felt a crushing weight anymore, but I still felt incomplete, and seeing their happiness, I decided to leave and travel on my own. Before I left, they told me of a coven, a family that lived a much different lifestyle than that of the usual nomads. And I found myself curious, intrigued. That was how I met the Cullen. They showed me that it was not necessary for vampires to needlessly end human lives to survive, that we could live off of animals if we tried, and he offered me a place in his family if I was willing to try. And you took his offer, I finished for him warmly. He nodded stiffly. It must have been difficult, more difficult for you to adjust to the vegetarian lifestyle than them. You hadn't needed to practice restraint before, and then suddenly you were expected to never drink human blood again. Harsh, I finished a little jokingly. He just stared at me carefully. Why aren't you afraid? Why aren't you disgusted? I have taken lives, fed on your kind. I can kill you so easily, and you wouldn't even register it happening, he said roughly, seeming a little angered at my responses. Plenty of humans have done things as bad as if not worse than that, and they don't have the excuse of being a soldier or doing it for survival. Humans could kill me just as easily, granted not as cleanly as you could or as fast, but easy. Yeah, they'd also need a gun or knife to do it clean, but again, easy. I saw him about to protest, but I interrupted him. Tell me something, he closed his mouth, waiting for the rest. How many times, since you've joined the Cullens, have you slipped up and taken a human life? He seemed conflicted about telling me. None, but I think about it all the time, have come close. It doesn't matter what you think and what you do are two different matters. I told him gently. Actions speak louder than words, Jasper. You have more self-restraint and strength of will than you think. I encouraged warmly. As expected of an army man, especially a major, I added teasingly. It's still warm. He just stared at me incredulously for a few moments. How do you do it? He asked suddenly. Do what? I asked, slightly startled by the question. How do you accept my sins, my flaws? How do you accept what I am so easily? I scoffed and smiled at him. Silly Jazz. Of course I'm accepting it all. After all, from the very beginning, I accepted you. He looked confused. I rolled my eyes at him. From the moment I decided to get to know you, from that very instant, I had decided to accept you. Whoever you ended up being, what you are or what you've done don't matter. Sure, it's nice to know how you became the person you are, but it's the person you are now that matters the most to me. That's all I'm interested in. And not once have I been disappointed. You're a gentleman. You're honest almost to the point of being blunt, almost rude. But I like that. You're serious and know that sometimes sacrifices have to be made, but you'd also do anything to protect your family. And again, you have way more self-restraint than you think. After all, I'm still alive, aren't I? By the end of my speech, he just smiled at me in exasperation. Yes, you are. I let myself bask in the smile a bit more before I allowed discomfort to show for the first time. My usual confident smile and feelings diminishing a little as I prepared to share my own secret, something I'd kept to myself since I was born and worked hard to keep secret from even my own twin sister. Since you've told me your secret, it's only fair I tell you mine. Though it's nothing like being a different species, I joked weakly at the end. He stayed silent as I looked at my lap, taking deep breaths. I can see visions of the future. I saw from the corner of my eye that he seemed to let out a breath I didn't know he was holding. You knew already? I asked, in more of a statement than a question. Your gift is rare and unusual, but not unique in a sense, Jasper hedged. I just raised my brow. Which means? I asked, slightly impatient. It seemed at this point that Jasper became suspicious. We know already, don't you? Knew what we were and know what we can do, Edward and I. I smiled at him, not surprised but still impressed. Yep, I said cheerily. I knew you were an empath, that Edward could read minds, and that you all were vampires because of visions I received approximately 1 month before we came to Forks, the same moment that Bella decided to come to Forks. Jasper just shook his head with that exasperated smile again before he took in the rest of my words. Edward has explained the semantics of your gift somewhat after sifting through your erratic thoughts. It seems you knew a way to counteract him, delving into your deeper thoughts, and revealing that you knew our secret, Jasper said, with a knowing smirk and raised eyebrow. I just laughed, having made a game of entertaining Edward with crazy thoughts while keeping him away from what I wanted, kept secret. I like my privacy, thank you, I sniffed haughtily before breaking into a happy grin and tone. I like to regulate my visions and only let him see what I wanted him to see. I've gotten pretty good at having 2 different thought processes going on at the same time. Besides, it'd be better if Edward didn't see some of the visions of the future that I've had, as it might change the course of the future, and I prefer it the way it is right now. I stated more seriously in the end, I'm assuming you like how the future will pan out, Jasper inquired. I smiled warmly at my hands, thinking how much they would come to be in contact with Jasper. When I see the happiness that surrounds Bella, Edward, you, me, and anyone else close to us, it's hard not to like it. See that absolute joy on our faces. My face, I want to experience it, not just look through a window. I want to know what it feels like, because they just look so complete, I said. Emotion making my voice thicker than I thought. I looked at Jasper, startled, when he turned my face to his by cupping my cheek with his cold hand. I vaguely registered that the car had stopped, and we were in a near-empty parking lot at school. You long for it. You yearn to feel what it is you saw of yourself in the future. You ache. He caressed his thumb across my cheekbone, his eyes boring into my own, my breath and heart quickening. Your thoughts are not the only thing that set you apart. Your emotions, they're so different. You feel as freely as a child does. No fear or inhibitions of being hurt holding you back, but they are not shallow. You feel as intensely as an adult does, but without their caution, without their lack of curiosity, their weariness of the world. I let my lids droop when our foreheads met, pressing together lightly, our noses just barely brushing against each other. They so easily overwhelm the ones of those around you. They're so vivid and powerful, they easily capture my attention, drowning out the rest until they are nothing more than white noise. I can't help but focus solely on you when I feel them. My breath hitched when he seemed to shudder and close his eyes at the spike of attraction and warmth I felt rush through me. His eyes slowly opened, once more locking me in their honey amber depths. Even now, it seems as if your feelings wash over me like warm waves on the sand. His hand slid further forward, his fingers combing through my short hair until he cupped the back of my head. They're almost intoxicating, he finished in a breathy whisper. I knew those words were what had my controls snap, and I really didn't care as much as I probably should have. My hands raised and wrapped themselves securely around Jasper's neck, our noses brushing a bit more as I leaned forward until I tilted my head just the slightest bit, so that our lips would meet without resistance. I felt Jasper's other hand come to rest on my shoulder before sliding down my back to rest flat on its lower half. I sighed contentedly into the chaste kiss, letting myself be pressed closer to his hard, cool body, his temperature seeping through my clothes and making me shiver in delight. He pulled away slowly, giving me a few more short pecks before returning to staring into my eyes. Our foreheads resting against each other as we both tried to recover our calm, and I also tried to recover a normal heartbeat and breathing rate. I smiled and laughed breathlessly when he teasingly nuzzled our noses together. The kiss and consequent cuddling, for lack of a better word, was a surprising but not unwelcome change in my vision, which could only mean that it was a split decision on Jasper's part. He had said he knew of the details of my gift, so I wondered if he had found a way to surprise me by somehow planning spontaneous decisions, but that didn't make sense. If he planned to make a decision, wouldn't she see it, or would she only see it when he made the decision itself? I didn't dwell on it long, instead just happy that the month that followed resulted in us getting much closer than before. Without any life-altering secrets in the way, Jasper and I could ask each other questions, get to know each other better without hesitation. Something we did wholeheartedly, if only privately. While we hadn't been overly public with our growing affections towards each other, if at all, people seemed to get the idea that I was Jasper's, not just part of the Cullens group. It didn't help that Jasper had kept more than a few overly curious students that wanted to inquire over the accident from me at bay using his empathetic abilities. I also couldn't help but be pleased when Jasper showed a surprising degree of dislike towards Tyler Crowley, who had infuriatingly decided to make it his mission to make amends with me for almost killing me, then making me mad when he switched targets to Bella, when I rebuffed his advances and Jasper intimidated him. I felt a little bad sitting with the Cullens while Bella was being snuffed by Edward, but was generally reassured by Jasper and Emmett, and sometimes surprisingly Rosie. Jasper being the most supportive as I trusted him with more visions than I did Edward, as he knew better than I did how to keep things from him. Though I felt guilty, I was constantly glad how she never questioned me after lunch or when we got home, though I assumed that she decided I would feign ignorance even if I did know something, or would be uncomfortable with the questions. Regardless, she was grateful for my vague reassurances and encouragements. Maybe it was a twin thing, who knew? The snow had washed away for good. After that stupid icy day, Mike was disappointed about not getting his snowball fight, but glad the beach trip to Push would soon be possible. The rain continued heavily, though, and the weeks passed. Bella had made me aware of another event looming on the horizon. Jessica had called the first Tuesday of March to ask her permission to invite Mike to the girls' choice spring dance in 2 weeks. This made my non-existent respect for her go up just the tiniest bit. "No, Jess, I'm not going," Bella assured her. I snickered, making her give me a glower. We both knew that her going to a dance without a proper escort was a hazard in itself. "You have fun with Mike," Bella encouraged. Though I knew that Jessica wouldn't need much convincing. Bella was competition after all, and only served as a means for her to gain more popularity via my sister. I knew the next day would be eventful, whether I like it or not. It would be the day, after all, that Edward deemed my sister worthy of hearing his voice again, but the most eventful scenes wouldn't happen until after school. I had refrained from telling Jasper what I saw as it would only make him angry, not that my keeping it from him would make him any happier, but he'd be in a bad mood for a lesser amount of time that way. After helping Bella survive through gym without harming herself overly much, we nearly ran to the parking lot, Bella to escape the horrible school day, and me to futilely try to escape the impending embarrassing scene that was about to occur. And just like I knew would happen, when I reached my precious baby, I saw Eric leaning against the hood of it, irking me as it had in my vision. "Eric," I said politely in greeting. "Hi, Maddie." "What's up?" I asked as I unlocked the door, trying not to outright frown at the uncomfortable edge in his voice. I was just wondering if you would go to the spring dance with me." His voice broke on the last word. "Wasn't it girls' choice?" I asked evenly, tossing my bag to the passenger seat, my lip quirking slightly in amusement. "Well, yeah," he admitted, shamefaced. I felt my expression soften as I kept in mind his awkwardness and the courage it took to ask me, especially considering I was supposed to be some kind of loner, now part of the Cullen clique, somehow hot chick. "Thank you for asking me, but I already had plans for that day. "I'm not going to the dance." "Oh," he said. "Well, maybe next time." "Maybe," I agreed gently, not wanting to completely crush him, but not wanting to give him false hope. He slouched off, back towards the school, and jumped a little when I felt a cold, hard arm snake around my waist and press my back flush against an equally cold and hard chest. "So that is why you felt that dread and anxiety during lunch," Jasper whispered sullenly into my ear, making me smile as the action itself made my cheeks warm a little. No matter what decision I made, it always led with him asking, even if you were here the whole time, it wouldn't have changed. It was unavoidable. So I decided to take the path where you would be grumpy for the least amount of time. I answered honestly, turning in his grasp and wrapping my arms loosely around his waist. "It's cute, but you're less fun when you're grumpy." He frowned at me, leaning until our foreheads touched, something that was quickly becoming a regular thing. Never in all my years of living have I met a male that liked being called cute. I laughed and gave his nose a peck. "That's because you don't hang in the same social circle as they do." I laughed at the funny expression on his face when I said that. "We're still planning on going to my house the day of the dance, correct?" Jasper asked after a while, letting his hands slide free of my waist as I did the same. "Of course, Jazz. What else did you think we'd be doing?" Jasper shrugged. "I thought you might send me to spy on Edward and your sister while you go shopping with Rosie and use Emmett as your pack mule," Jasper answered decisively. I paused for a bit before laughing again. "True, it sounds plausible. But I don't need you to spy on them when I know what's going to happen. The visions are completely solid by now. As much as I wouldn't really hang out with Edward as person, he is a good guy and I trust him enough not to kill my sister," I said confidently, but warmly. Jasper was silent for a moment. "It's strange." I tilted my head at him in a silent question and he answered, "Many times when you speak, I can see you as one of us, a vampire rather than a human, despite the beating of your heart and the warm blood coursing through you. You speak so easily of your own kind as if you were not a part of them." I gave a wistful smile then. "It's easy to see myself apart from them when I have something that makes me so different." He only gave me a comforting smile and kissed the top of my head softly before heading towards Edward's Volvo. "Did you feel the emotions from both of them when she said his name?" I asked Jasper in amusement, watching from our perch on one of the outdoor cafeteria tables out onto the parking lots where Bella and Edward were. "Frighteningly similar," Jasper replied with just as much amusement. "Oh, look, he's dazzling her," I gushed excitedly as if I was watching a show, which sometimes it felt like it did. "He's so absorbed with her that he's completely tuning us out. He's not annoyed at us for observing him because he hasn't even acknowledged we're here." I leaned further back into him and kissed his jawline. "Would you notice Edward around if I had my attention solely on you?" I asked softly, the mood changing instantly. Jasper matched my pace immediately, used to my sudden changes in attitude already. His golden eyes smoldered into mine. "What Edward?" Jasper murmured back heatedly. I only smiled in response.